There's a place in Middle-earth where the very air seems to whisper secrets of the past. A ruined city bathed in an eerie, sickly glow, where shadows cling to the stones like memories of forgotten horrors. Tonight, we step into the haunted halls of Minas Morgul, where the story of the Witch King begins not with a roar, but with a desperate whisper. Picture this: a lone figure, cloaked in tattered robes, kneels before an altar darker than midnight, his voice trembling as he speaks words older than time itself. This was once a man of noble blood, a king who believed his plea for vengeance would save his people, but some bargains twist the soul beyond recognition. Wherever you're listening from, whether it's the quiet hours past midnight or the golden light of evening, let us know in the comments below. There's something hauntingly intimate about sharing this tale as the world outside your window grows still, don't you think? Because this isn't just a story of power or dark magic. It's a story of how even the brightest hearts can fracture under the weight of loss. That altar in Minas Morgul didn't just grant strength. It demanded a price, one that would echo through centuries. Can you feel it? The way the air hums with something ancient, something hungry. That's the moment everything changes. The moment a king becomes something else entirely. His fingers clutch at the cold stone, his voice rising in a chant that makes the very stars seem to shudder. And as the glow of the altar pulses like a dying heartbeat, we're left to wonder, was it the darkness that found him, or was it his own despair that called it forth? This is the mystery we'll unravel together, the slow, tragic unraveling of a man who believed he had nothing left to lose. So settle in, close your eyes, and let the whispers of Minas Morgul carry you into the deepest corners of Middle-earth's most chilling legend. The Witch King's origin is waiting, and it's far more heartbreaking than you might expect. The wind howls through the broken arches of the temple, carrying with it the scent of charred timber and old blood, the last remnants of a kingdom that once shone like a jewel in the sun. He remembers the banners, crimson and gold, snapping in the breeze as his people cheered. He remembers the laughter of his children in the courtyard, the warmth of his queen's hand in his. But memory is a cruel thing, because now all he sees are the flames. The invaders came at dawn, their swords glinting like ice, and by nightfall, his world was reduced to ashes. Kneeling on the cracked stone floor, his breath comes in ragged gasps. The weight of his crown, once a symbol of pride, now feels like a chain, dragging him deeper into the dark. The temple walls are lined with carvings of figures with hollow eyes, their mouths open in silent screams. He knows the stories, the warnings whispered by the elders. This place was never meant for the living. Yet here he is, drawn by the promise of power to scour his enemies from the earth, to make them suffer as he has suffered. A faint blue light pulses from the altar, illuminating an object wrapped in tattered cloth. His fingers twitch. The air hums with something ancient, something watching. The voices begin as a murmur, slithering into his mind like smoke. "We can give you what you desire," they hiss. Strength beyond mortal flesh, a vengeance that will echo through the ages. His hands shake, not from fear, but from the raw, gnawing hunger in his chest. He knows this is madness, but what is a king without his people? What is a man without his heart? The cloth falls away, revealing a circlet of blackened metal, cold to the touch. As his fingers brush against it, The voices rise to a chorus, whispering names he does not recognize, names that taste like poison on his tongue. Somewhere deep inside, a part of him screams to turn back. But the part that matters, the part that remembers the smell of burning flesh, the sound of his wife's last breath, reaches out and takes it. The moment the circlet touches his brow, the world fractures. Pain lances through him, white hot and endless, as if his very soul is being unraveled. The temple dissolves into shadows, and the voices are no longer whispers, they are roars, laughter, the sound of something old and ravenous finally being fed. He does not scream, he does not beg, because in the heart of the agony, he feels it, the power coursing through him like a black river. The last thing he sees before the darkness claims him is his own reflection in the altar's surface, eyes now burning with a light that is not his own. And just like that, the king is gone. What rises from the stone is something else entirely. The air itself seems to hold its breath as the circlet's power floods through him, a torrent of ice and fire that scorches away the last fragments of the man he once was. His vision swims with images, not his own, towers of black stone, rising from plains of ash, armies of faceless soldiers moving as one, and above it all, a presence vast and terrible, watching him from the dark like a spider poised above its web. Then comes the voice, deeper than the earth, older than the mountains. You are broken, it murmurs, not unkindly, but broken things can be reforged, stronger, sharper, eternal. His hands tremble, not from weakness now, but from the raw, seething energy coursing through his veins. The voice continues, a velvet whisper wrapped around a blade. Give me your oath, and I will give you the strength to scour your enemies from the earth. Not just their lives, their very memory. You will walk the ages as death itself, and they will know fear as you have known it. The offer hangs in the air, thick as smoke. Somewhere, buried beneath the pain and the fury, a spark of the king he was recoils. This is no bargain, it is surrender. But the spark is drowning. The invader's laughter rings in his ears. The phantom scent of burning flesh fills his nose, and the weight of his crown. The crown he failed to protect presses heavier than ever. His lips part, and the words come out ragged, torn from him like a confession. I swear it. The moment the vow leaves his mouth, the temple groans as if the stones themselves are in agony. Shadows lash upward like living things, coiling around his arms, his throat, seeping into his mouth and eyes. The pain is beyond anything mortal flesh should endure, but he does not scream. He welcomes it. When the darkness finally recedes, the man is gone. What stands in his place is taller, gaunt, wreathed in a chill that makes the very air crackle. The circlet has fused to his brow, its twisted metal now part of him. His hands, once calloused from sword and scepter, are pale as bone, fingers twitching with power that thrums just beneath the skin. The voice returns, satisfied. Rise, my servant, rise and let the world learn to tremble. And so he does. The first step sends cracks radiating through the temple floor. The second sends a gust of wind, howling through the ruins, scattering dust and dead leaves like frightened birds. By the third step, he does not remember the color of his queen's eyes. By the fourth, her name is ash on the wind. The fifth step carries him into the moonlight, where the pale glow does not touch him, where nothing will ever touch him again. The Witch-King of Angmar walks forth, and Middle-earth will never be the same. The first thing he notices is the silence, not the absence of sound, but the absence of warmth. The wind still howls through the ruins, but it no longer bites his skin. The cold is part of him now, seeping from his bones like mist from a grave. He flexes his fingers, and the air shivers in response. The power is there, coiled beneath his flesh, waiting. A whisper of movement, and the shattered remnants of his cloak, once embroidered with the sigil of his house, crumbles to dust at his feet. He should mourn it. He doesn't. A laugh tears from his throat, raw and unfamiliar, as he raises one skeletal hand. The shadows obey before he even wills it, swirling like ink in water. Then comes the fire, not the bright, cleansing flames of a hearth, but something hungrier. Spectral tongues of green and black erupt from his palm, licking at the ruins of the temple. The carved faces of the old gods blister and blacken, their hollow eyes melting like wax. The heat should scorch him. Instead, it feels like coming home. But then, a flicker, a memory, sharp as a knife. His daughter's voice, begging him to stay as he rode to war. The flames stutter. His breath hitches, though he no longer needs to breathe. What surges up isn't regret, not exactly. It's the ghost of a question. Is this what you wanted? The circlet burns against his brow, and the voices return in a rush, drowning the thought in whispers of blood and dominion. He clenches his fist, and the fire roars higher, devouring the last traces of the man he was. The tapestries, the shattered throne, the little wooden horse he'd carved for his son. As the embers rise into the night, something in the darkness laughs with him, or perhaps it's just the wind. Either way, the doubt is gone. There's no turning back now. The Witch-King steps forward, and the ground itself recoils beneath his tread. The night is thick with the scent of damp earth and something fouler, the metallic tang of fear, of power misused. The Witch-King stands atop a ruined watchtower, his tattered cloak stirring in a wind that carries no warmth. Below him, the land stretches barren, a wasteland where nothing grows but shadows. Then comes the sound, 8 pairs of boots, crunching on brittle stone, 8 ragged breaths that no longer need air. They emerge from the darkness one by one, their forms flickering like candle flames in a draught. Kings they were once, proud men, who knelt at altars not unlike his own, who whispered vows they could never take back. Now their faces are hidden beneath hoods, their eyes nothing but embers in the deep. Sauron's voice curls through the air, a sound like stone, grinding against stone. Behold your brothers, it says, bound to you as you are bound to me. The Witch-King turns, studying them. One clutches the hilt of a broken sword, another fingers the remnants of a crown melted into his flesh. Their agony is palpable, a living thing writhing beneath their skin. Yet when he raises his hand, they still as one, their obedience absolute. A twisted warmth flickers in his chest, pride, or something like it. This is power. Not the hollow rage of vengeance, but the certainty that when he speaks, the world will tremble. Kneel, he commands, and the word is little more than a whisper. The wind steals it, carries it away, but the Nazgûl hear. They drop as if their bones have turned to water, their cloaks pooling around them like spilled ink. For a heartbeat, there is only silence. Then the screaming begins, not from pain, not from fear, but from something far worse, remembrance. The Witch-King knows it well, the sudden, gutting clarity of what they've lost. The taste of wine on a summer evening, the weight of a child's hand in theirs, the way the dawn used to paint their halls in gold. It lasts only a moment before the darkness rushes back in, smothering the light. But it's enough. One of the wraiths lifts his head, the hollows of his eyes seething with green fire. Why, the word isn't spoken aloud. It scrapes against the Witch-King's mind like a blade on stone. He doesn't answer. He doesn't need to. They all know the truth now. This was never a bargain. It was a slow, inevitable drowning. The Witch-King turns his face to the sky, where the stars hide behind a veil of smoke. Somewhere beyond the clouds, the moon hangs cold, indifferent. His fingers flex, and the Nazgûl rise as one. Their screams fade into the wind, but the silence that follows is worse. It lingers, heavy with the unspoken question. If they could go back, would they choose differently? The Witch-King doesn't wonder. He already knows the answer. The moon hangs low over Minas Ithil, its silver light catching on the city's white towers that once gleamed like pearls against the mountainside. Now they flicker in the glow of distant fires, their beauty marred by tendrils of smoke that curl into the night. Below the walls, an army moves in perfect silence, their black banners untouched by the wind. At their head, the Witch-King raises a gauntleted hand, and the earth itself seems to hold its breath. The siege has lasted for months, but tonight, the city will fall. A voice echoes from the ramparts, raw with desperation. You fought beside us at Dagorlad. You broke bread in these very halls. The Lord of Minas Ithil stands silhouetted against the torchlight, his armor dented, his face streaked with ash and sweat. Remember who you were. The plea hangs in the air, trembling like a plucked string. For a heartbeat, the Witch-King hesitates. Somewhere beneath the layers of shadow and torment, a memory stirs the clink of goblets, the weight of a friendly hand on his shoulder, the shared laughter of men who believed their swords could keep the darkness at bay. Then the circlet burns against his brow, and the voices return, whispering of betrayal. They left you to burn, the darkness hisses. They watched as your kingdom fell. The Witch-King's fingers twitch. The Lord of Minas Ithil takes a step forward, his eyes wide with something like hope. It's that hope that undoes him. The Witch-King moves faster than thought, his blade a streak of molten shadow. The Lord staggers, his mouth opening not to scream, but to whisper a name. The name of the man the Witch-King used to be. The sword twists, and the light in the Lord's eyes gutters out like a candle in the rain. Around them, the city's defenders freeze, their weapons slipping from numb fingers. The Witch-King watches as the first tower cracks, its stones groaning as they collapse into the courtyard. The noise is deafening, but all he hears is the silence where his friend's heartbeat used to be. Minas Ithil burns, not with the quick, bright flames of conquest, but with a slow, creeping fire that turns marble to charcoal and melts the gold from the rooftops. The Nazgûl drift through the streets, their whispers turning children's laughter into screams, their touch withering the lush gardens into fields of brittle thorns. High above, the moon vanishes behind a shroud of smoke, and the city's new name rises from the ashes like a curse. Minas Morgul, the Tower of Sorcery. The Tower of the Dead. The Witch-King walks through the ruins, his footsteps leaving no imprint on the ash. He pauses beside the body of the Lord, reaching down to close the man's staring eyes. The gesture is almost tender, Then he turns away, and the last flicker of warmth in the city dies with him. Somewhere in the shadows, a pale green light begins to pulse. It starts in the deepest vaults, where the city's scholars once kept their most precious treasures. Now it seeps through the cracks in the stone, staining the rubble with its sickly glow. The Witch-King does not need to see it to know what it means. The work is done, the price is paid, and somewhere in the void, his master smiles. The ring glints dully in the pale light of Minas Morgul, its surface etched with runes that writhe like living things under his gaze. The Witch-King flexes his skeletal fingers, watching as the band of black metal pulses faintly, as if breathing. It should be cold against his flesh, what little remains of it, but instead it burns. A constant, gnawing heat that seeps into the hollow spaces between bone and shadow, reminding him with every heartbeat he no longer has, "You are mine." For a moment, just a moment, the whispers falter. The darkness in his mind parts like smoke, and he remembers, not the fire, not the blood, but the quiet things. The weight of a signet ring on his right hand, stamped with the crest of his house. The way his daughter would press her small fingers against it, giggling as she tried to twist it free. The scent of rain on the courtyard herbs, the warmth of the sun on his face as he watched his knight's train. These are not memories, they are ghosts, slipping through his grasp like water the moment he reaches for them. Then the ring tightens, a spike of agony lances up his arm, and the visions shatter. Sauron's voice coils around his thoughts, thick as tar. "You are nothing but a vessel," it murmurs. A blade to be wielded. The Witch-King bows his head, not in submission, but in something closer to exhaustion. The resistance is gone. There is no fight left in him, only the slow, sickening realization that he doesn't want to fight anymore. The ring's whispers are a comfort now, a lullaby sung in the voice of the only master he has ever truly known. Somewhere beyond the tower walls, a nightingale sings. The sound is achingly pure, a relic of a world that no longer belongs to him. The Witch-King lifts his hand, watching as the shadows gather between his fingers, swallowing the last traces of moonlight. He could crush the bird with a thought, silence its song forever. His fingers twitch, then still. The moment passes. The nightingale flies on, untouched. The ring hums against his flesh, a question disguised as a caress. Why hesitate? It seems to ask. The Witch-King has no answer, or perhaps he does, and it's too terrible to speak aloud. Even now, after centuries of carnage, there are still corners of his soul the darkness hasn't reached. Small, buried things, fragile as a bird's bones. The realization should terrify him. Instead, it ignites a rage so deep, it turns his vision white. He snarls, slamming his fist into the tower wall. Stone cracks, dust billowing into the air like a shroud. The nightingale flees. The ring's satisfaction is a living thing, pulsing in time with his fury. Good it purrs, hate them, hate the light, hate the weakness that still lingers in you. By the time the dust settles, the moment of clarity is gone. The Witch-King stares at the ruin of his own making, the shattered stone, the silence where a song used to be. The ring gleams, smug and silent. He turns away, his cloak swirling behind him like a storm cloud. The past is dead. The man is dead. All that remains is the blade, the shadow, the endless hunger. And so the Witch-King walks on, leaving only footprints of frost in his wake. The scent of fear is thick in the air here, clinging to the thatched roofs of the village like morning mist. The Witch-King moves through the narrow lanes like a shadow given form, his armored boots silent on the packed earth. The people don't scream. They've learned better. They huddle behind bolted doors, their breath held, their prayers choked to whispers. Somewhere in this pitiful cluster of huts, the blood of Isildur lingers. A flicker, a spark. The ring on his finger thrums like a second heartbeat, guiding him forward. Then, there, a cottage at the edge of the village, its door slightly ajar, as if someone fled in haste. Inside, the fire still crackles, a half-eaten loaf of bread abandoned on the table, and in the corner, a child, no older than 5, perhaps 6, with wide eyes that gleam too bright with understanding. The Witch-King steps closer, his sword already whispering from its sheath. The child doesn't cower, doesn't beg, just stares, as if seeing straight through the shadows to the ruin beneath. The blade trembles in his grasp, not from weakness, never from weakness, but from something far worse. A memory, jagged and unbidden. Another child, long ago, clutching his cloak as he rode to war. "Come home," she'd pleaded. The image sears through him, bright as lightning, and for the first time in centuries he hesitates. The moment stretches, thin as a frayed thread. The child's breath hitches. The ring burns, a brand against his flesh. Sauron's voice a snarl in his skull. "Kill it." His fingers tighten. The child scrambles backward, knocking over a clay jug. The sound, ordinary, fragile, shatters the spell. The Witch-King snarls, swinging the blade down, and stops. The tip hovers a hair's breadth from the child's throat. The cottage is silent save for the crackle of the fire, the ragged hitch of the child's breath. The Witch-King stares at his own reflection in those terrified eyes and sees not a king, not a conqueror, but a ghost. A hollow thing wearing a dead man's face. The child moves faster than he expects, darting between his legs, out the door, into the night. The Witch-King lets him go. Not from mercy, never from mercy, but because the rage that follows is sweeter, hotter, more familiar than the gnawing emptiness in his chest. Outside, the Nazgûl stir, their forms flickering at the edges of the village like half-seen nightmares. They felt it too, the hesitation, the flaw in their master's will. He steps into the moonlight, his sword still unsheathed. The child is gone, vanished into the woods. But the truth remains, clinging like rot. He could have ended it, should have, and somewhere in the depths of Barad-dûr, his master knows. The night air trembles as the Witch-King raises his face to the stars and screams, a sound not of fury, but of something far more dangerous. Doubt the hunt will go on, the blood of Isildur will be found, but tonight, for the first time since the altar in Minas Morgul, the darkness does not feel like home. The ruins of his old kingdom rise from the mist like the bones of a long-dead beast, the shattered towers casting jagged shadows across the broken courtyard. The Witch-King stands where the throne once sat, his boots crunching on fragments of colored glass that used to form the crest of his house, a crest now ground into the dirt. The wind carries the scent of rotting banners and old iron, and for the first time in centuries, the weight of his crown feels real again. Visions flicker at the edges of his sight, not the usual nightmares of fire and blood, but softer things. The way the sunlight used to catch on the silver threads in his queen's hair, the sound of his son's laughter echoing through these very halls, the warmth of a hand on his shoulder, the press of a child's cheek against his own. These are not memories, they are wounds ripped open by the child in the village, by the hesitation that should have been impossible. A sound tears from his throat, less a scream than a howl, raw and guttural. The stones tremble with it. The other Nazgûl linger at the edges of the ruin, their hollow eyes fixed on him, their silence heavier than judgment. They've felt it too, the cracks in his will, the rot in their master's control. One of them takes a step forward, the remnants of a kingly cloak fluttering in the wind. The Witch-King whirls, his blade flashing, and the wraith freezes. The message is clear. Come closer, and he will carve the obedience back into their bones. Then the voice comes, not a whisper this time, but a roar, shaking the foundations of the world. You are mine. The words slam into him like a fist, driving him to his knees. The circlet sears his brow, the pain so vast it blots out everything, the visions, the doubt, even the rage. Sauron's will crashes over him like a wave, relentless, suffocating. You are nothing. You are mine. The Witch-King claws at the ground, his fingers scraping through centuries of dust. Somewhere beneath the pain, the defiance flares again, a spark, quickly smothered. The voice softens, almost mocking. Did you think you could escape? Did you think you had a choice? A laugh echoes through the ruins, colder than the wind. Look at what you are, and he does. His reflection stares back at him from a puddle of black water. A hollow-eyed wraith, a monster draped in the tatters of a dead king's glory. The last flicker of resistance gutters out. The child in the village, the ghost of his daughter's voice. None of it matters, they never did. The Nazgûl stir as he rises, their forms bending like reeds in the wind. The Witch-King turns his face to the east, where the horizon burns with the light of a distant forge. The ring on his finger pulses, a reminder, a chain. He takes the first step, then the next, leaving the ruins behind. The past is dead, the man is dead. All that remains is the march, but deep in the dark, where even Sauron's voice cannot reach, something small and broken still whispers. And the Witch-King pretends, just for a moment, that he cannot hear it. The battlefield is a churning sea of blood and steel, the air thick with the screams of the dying and the acrid stench of burning flesh. The Witch-King moves through the chaos like a blade through water, his mace sweeping through ranks of elven warriors as if they were stalks of wheat before a scythe. Their armor shatters like glass beneath his blows, their proud banners trampled into the mud. He does not revel in the slaughter, not exactly. It is simply what he was made for. The cries of the fallen are little more than whispers against the roaring void in his chest. Then a shift, a tremor in the earth, a crack in the sky. The Witch-King turns, and there across the ruined plain, he sees it. Isildur's sword flashing in the dying light, Sauron's form collapsing like a felled tower. The shockwave of his master's fall ripples outward, sending warriors to their knees, shaking the very bones of the earth. For a heartbeat, the Witch-King stands frozen. The ringing silence is deafening, and then something impossible. A flicker in the darkness, a loosening of the chains. The circlet on his brow cools, just for a moment. The voices in his mind stutter, fade. He stares at his hands, the blackened gauntlets slick with gore, and for the first time in centuries, he wonders. Is this what freedom feels like? The thought is fragile, absurd, but it's there, gnawing at the edges of his resolve like a starving thing. Around him, the other Nazgûl stagger, their hollow eyes darting, lost. Then the call comes, faint at first, a thread of sound woven into the wind. The One Ring. Its voice is sweeter than Sauron's, softer, but no less insistent. Come to me, it murmurs, find me. The Witch-King's breath hitches a reflex, nothing more. He no longer needs air, but the compulsion is worse than any pain, a hook in his ribs dragging him forward. The moment of hesitation shatters. The circlet flares white-hot, searing the doubt from his mind, and the shadow rushes back in like a tide. By the time he takes his first step toward Mordor's ruins, the man who dared to hope is already gone. The Nazgûl fall in behind him, their forms flickering like candle flames in a storm. The battlefield fades into the distance, littered with the broken and the dead. Somewhere among them, a lone elven banner flutters, its silver threads catching the last rays of the sun. The Witch-King does not look back, but deep beneath the layers of torment, in a place even the ring cannot touch, a single ember glows. It is not hope, not defiance, just the faint, stubborn pulse of something that refuses to die. And as the shadows of Mordor close around him once more, that ember burns quiet, relentless, waiting. The years stretch into centuries, each one longer than the last, an endless march of shadows and silence. The Witch-King drifts through the ruins of his fallen kingdom like smoke through a graveyard, his footsteps leaving no mark on the crumbling stone. The world moves on without him. Forests creep over the bones of his halls. Rivers carve new paths through the ashes of his cities. Mortals whisper his name in fireside tales, twisting the truth until even he barely recognizes the monster they describe. Memories that once burned sharp as a blade now blur at the edges, slipping through his grasp like water. The face of his queen, once so vivid he could trace its lines in the dark, is little more than a smudge of color in his mind. His children's voices, their laughter, the weight of their small hands in his, gone, or nearly so. What lingers isn't grief, it's the absence of grief, a hollow where pain used to be. The ring on his finger thrums, a constant reminder. You are mine. You have always been mine. He wanders through the high passes of the misty mountains, where the wind howls with the voices of dead kings. Through the swamps of the dead marshes, where pale faces stare up from the water, their lips moving in silent pleas. He lingers sometimes, staring at those faces, wondering if one of them might be his own. But the water shows him nothing but shadows. The Nazgûl are seldom far, their presence a dull ache at the edges of his awareness. They do not speak. There is nothing left to say. They are 9 knives waiting in the dark, 9 strings pulled taut by the same unseen hand. When the wind shifts, when the stars wheel into alignment, they feel it, the faintest tremor in the void. The ring is stirring, and then, one day, the whisper comes. Not a shout, not a command, but a thread of sound woven into the fabric of the world itself. The Witch-King lifts his head, the circlet burning against his brow for the first time in an age. Far to the east, in the depths of Mirkwood, something golden and terrible winks awake. The hunger that follows is worse than any pain, worse than the slow erosion of his mind. It claws at him, relentless, ravenous. He turns his face toward the rising sun, and for the first time in 1,000 years, the Witch-King smiles. The wait is over. The hunt begins. The wind howls through the empty streets of Minas Morgul, carrying with it a scent long forgotten in these cursed lands: fresh earth, green leaves, the faintest whisper of life. The Witch-King stands motionless atop the tower, his gauntleted fingers curled around the parapet. For centuries, he has been a shadow drifting through the ruins of the world, a blade waiting in its sheath. But now the air thrums with something new, a pulse, a call. Somewhere far to the west, the One Ring has stirred, and its voice cuts through the darkness like a knife through silk. He turns, and the Nazgûl are already there, their tattered cloaks billowing in the unnatural wind. No words pass between them, none are needed. After an age of waiting, the hunt begins anew. There mounts great winged beasts with eyes like smoldering coals, let out shrieks that freeze the blood of every living thing for leagues around. The Witch-King swings onto his steed, and as one, they rise into the night, their forms blotting out the stars. The lands blur beneath them, forests and rivers reduced to streaks of shadow. Villages scatter like frightened mice at their passing, but the Witch-King does not linger. There is only one prey that matters now. The ring's song grows louder with each passing day, a siren's call woven into the very fabric of his being. It leads them north, to a ragged hill crowned with broken stones weather-top. And there, amidst the ruins, a flicker of warmth in the cold night. A fire. The hobbit is smaller than he expected, a fragile thing, clutching a blade that looks like a toy in his tiny hands. Yet when their eyes meet, something inexplicable happens. The Witch-King falters, not from fear. He has forgotten what fear feels like, but from something far more unsettling. Recognition. The hobbit's eyes are wide with terror, yes, but beneath it burns a defiance that should not exist, a spark of courage that refuses to be extinguished. It is absurd, it is impossible, and yet for the first time in 2,000 years, the Witch-King hesitates. The Nazgûl shift around him, their hunger palpable. The hobbit's companions are shouting now, their voices thin and desperate. One swings a torch, its flame guttering in the wind. The Witch-King could end this in an instant. His sword thirsts for the hobbit's blood. The ring's call is a roar in his skull, so why does his arm not move? The answer comes not from the darkness, but from a place long buried. Another face, another pair of eyes brimming with the same stubborn light. His daughter. The memory crashes into him like a wave, so vivid it staggers him. She had stood just so, small fists raised, ready to fight a world too cruel for her kindness. The Witch-King's grip tightens on his sword. The moment stretches, brittle as ice. Then the hobbit strikes. The blade flashes, a mere pinprick of pain, but pain all the same. The shock of it jolts the Witch-King back into the present. The past is gone, the man is gone. With a snarl, he raises his weapon, but the hobbit's friends drag him away, their retreat swallowed by the night. The Nazgûl surge forward, but the Witch-King holds up a hand. Let them run, let them hope. The hunt is far from over, and somewhere in the hollow spaces of his being, the Witch-King wonders, when next they meet, will that spark of defiance still unsettle him? Or will he finally snuff it out? The air over Pelennor Fields reeks of smoke and spilled blood, the ground churned to mud beneath the trampling feet of horses and the dead. The Witch-King strides through the carnage, his mace slick with gore, each swing scattering Gondor's finest like leaves in a storm. The city's gates lie in splinters, its proud banners trampled into the mire. Victory pulses through him, hot and heady, until a flash of silver catches his eye. A shield maiden, golden hair whipping in the wind, stands between him and the broken gates. Her sword is steady, her eyes burning with a fire that makes the wraith pause. "You stand between me and my prey," he rasps, the words slithering from the darkness beneath his helm. "No living man may hinder me," the woman Eowyn does not flinch. "But no living man am I." Her voice rings clear over the battlefield, a defiance so bright it sears. "You look upon a woman, and I do not fear you, shadow. For a heartbeat, time fractures. The Witch-King sees not this stranger, but another face, another woman who once stood unbroken before him. His queen, her hands clenched around the hilt of his own sword, shielding their children as the invaders closed in. The memory is a blade, twisting in his gut, sharper than any wound. Then it's gone, drowned in the roar of the Nazgûl's fury. He strikes, his mace a blur of black iron. Eowyn staggers, her shield shattering, but she does not fall. Her sword flashes, biting deep into his unseen flesh. Pain erupts, not the dull ache of centuries, but white-hot and blinding. The Witch-King reels, his form flickering like a guttering candle. The battlefield dissolves into fragments. The sky, the screams, the weight of his crown crumbling to dust. As the darkness claims him, his last thought is not of Sauron's will or the ring's call. It's of a sunlit courtyard, of a child's laughter, of hands that once knew the weight of a scepter instead of a sword. The king he was, the man he might have been. Then nothing. The wind carries his ashes eastward, over the mountains, over the ruins of his kingdom, scattering them like seeds upon barren ground. Somewhere, deep in the earth, the roots of a dead tree stir. But no one is left to notice. The battlefield falls eerily still as the Witch-King's form disintegrates into swirling ash, carried away by a wind that smells strangely of old parchment and extinguished candles. For a heartbeat, no one moves, not the soldiers of Gondor clutching their wounds, not the Rohirrim kneeling in exhaustion beside their fallen steeds. Even the crows circling overhead seem to pause mid-flight, as if the world itself is holding its breath. Then, like puppets with their strings cut, the remaining Nazgûl stagger. Their once unbreakable unity shatters, their spectral forms flickering like candle flames in a storm. One by one, they crumple, their cloaks collapsing inward as if the darkness that sustained them has suddenly drained away. But it's the sound that lingers, not the cheers of the victorious, not the clatter of dropped weapons, but a single, shuddering wail that rises from the empty space where the Witch-King fell. It claws at the air, raw and wordless, a noise that shouldn't exist in daylight. Some claim it's just the wind whistling through broken armor. Others swear it was a voice, fractured by centuries of torment, finally finding release. A child near the city gates bursts into tears, though she cannot say why. High above, the clouds part, and for the first time in an age, sunlight touches the Pelennor Fields. The warmth should feel like hope, but in the shadows where the Nazgûl fell, the grass blackens and withers, as if the earth itself refuses to forget what walked there. The soldiers exchange uneasy glances, their celebration faltering. Victory tastes bitter on their tongues, and far to the east, in the ruins of a forgotten kingdom, a cracked circlet rolls from its perch on a broken altar, landing in the dust with a sound like a sigh. The wind carries it away too, leaving only silence, and the unshakable feeling that something, somewhere, is still watching. Even in death, the Witch King leaves no peace. His ashes may have scattered, his crown may have crumbled, but fear has roots deeper than any grave. In the taverns of Bree, travelers huddle close to the fire as old men spin tales of a shadow that still walks the ruins of Minas Morgul. A flicker of movement at the edge of vision, a whisper that isn't quite the wind. Parents in Gondor warn restless children that if they stray too far into the wilds at dusk, they might hear the rasp of black armor on stone. The stories twist with each telling, growing sharper in some places, softer in others, but the lesson remains the same. Vengeance is a fire that consumes the hand that holds it first. Yet not all whispers speak of terror. In the hidden valleys of the Dunlendings, where the past is never truly buried, some claim to have seen a wraith clad in tattered silver, not black, kneeling at the overgrown graves of the very people he once slaughtered. The dwarves of the Blue Mountains tell of a presence that haunts the old battlefields, lifting fallen weapons from the mud and laying them gently at the feet of carved memorials. Are these merely the fancies of folk who have stared too long into the dark? Or could it be that even a soul as shattered as the Witch King's leaves behind fragments, not of power, but of regret? Scholars in Rivendell argue over ancient scrolls that speak of the Nazgûl's curse, that they would walk the earth so long as the memory of their sins did. And memory is a stubborn thing. Every time a farmer crosses himself at the sound of a night bird's cry, every time a soldier hesitates before striking a fallen foe, the Witch King's legacy grows heavier. But there's another tale, older still, whispered by the elves who remember the world before the shadows lengthened. They say the darkest spirits are not bound by hatred alone, but by the things they loved and failed to save. On stormy nights, when the wind howls through the cracks of Weathertop, shepherds swear they hear something else beneath the gale, a voice, broken into echoes, calling a name no one recognizes. Perhaps it's just the stones settling, or perhaps, in the spaces between revenge and ruin, there's room for one last, unanswered question. What if the dead don't always stay as they were? What if even the blackest shadow, given enough time, might finally turn its face toward the light? The stories will keep circling, as stories do, but in the quiet places, where the weight of centuries presses hardest, the air sometimes shivers with something that isn't quite fear. It's the hush before a choice, the pause between a breath and a word, and though no living soul can say for certain, the night feels watchful, as if something long thought finished is still waiting. The wind howls through the ruins of Minas Morgul like a dying thing, its voice full of broken teeth and jagged edges. The traveler, a merchant from Dale, though he'll never admit it to the folk back home, pauses in the shadow of a crumbling archway, his torch guttering in the unnatural draft. It's then he hears it, not the moan of the wind, not the skitter of rats over stone, but a whisper, a voice so thin it might be his own imagination, yet it curls around his ribs like a cold finger. Help me, he whirls, the torchlight carving frantic shapes into the darkness. The ruins are empty, of course they are. Everyone knows the stories the Witch King is dust, his fortress a tomb for nothing but echoes. Yet the air hums with something older than fear, something that makes the hair on his neck stand rigid. The shadows between the pillars don't just shift. They lean. A child's laugh rings out, high and clear, impossible in this place of decay. The merchant stumbles back, his boot catching on a loose stone. The torch falls, its flame hissing against damp rock. In the sudden dark, the whisper comes again, closer now, remember me, it's not a plea, it's a command. He runs, through the shattered halls, past the skeletal remains of what might have been a throne, his breath ragged in his throat. Behind him, the stones groan, as if something long buried is pulling itself free. The laugh follows him, skipping at his heels like a playful thing, until it isn't, until it twists into a scream, into the sound of a blade scraping bone, into the choked gasp of a man who died 2,000 years ago with his kingdom's name on his lips. The merchant bursts into the moonlight, his hands clawing at his own face, his clothes reeking of cold earth and something fouler. He'll tell no one what he heard. Not the guards at the city gates, not the innkeeper who pales at the sight of him, not even the priest who presses a vial of holy water into his shaking hands. But that night, as he lies sleepless in a borrowed bed, the wind outside his window carries more than just the rustle of leaves. It carries a sigh, a name, a fragment of a lullaby in a tongue no living man speaks, and in the ruins of Minas Morgul, a single pale light flickers, once, twice before winking out. As if something at last has been answered, deep beneath the ruined spires of Minas Morgul, where even the bravest explorers dare not tread, the air hums with a sound older than the stones themselves, a whisper, fractured and raw, repeating the same cursed words that once twisted a king into a monster. The chamber is small, its walls slick with condensation that glows faintly green, reflecting off the shattered remnants of an altar. And there, in the center of it all, a figure kneels. Not the towering terror of legend, not the shadow that made armies flee, but something quieter, something broken. His fingers, if they can still be called fingers, press against the cracked stone, tracing the same runes he carved in desperation centuries ago. The incantation spills from his lips like a wound bleeding anew, each syllable a hammer striking the anvil of his fate. The words haven't changed, the hunger hasn't faded. But the voice is different now. No longer the roar of a conqueror, but the rasp of a prisoner rattling his chains. Grant me strength, he pleads, though there's no one left to hear. Grant me vengeance. The darkness does not answer. It never does, not anymore. A gust of wind slithers through the chamber, carrying with it the faintest echo of laughter. Children playing in some distant village, unaware that the monster under their bedtime stories is whispering their own nightmares back to the void. The Witch-King's head jerks up. For a moment, the green light catches the hollow where his face should be, and if you squinted, you might almost mistake the emptiness for an expression. Not rage, not triumph, something far worse, recognition. The laughter fades, and the chamber collapses back into silence, save for the steady drip of water and the relentless murmur of the incantation. He doesn't remember their names, not clearly, but the ache remains, a thorn buried so deep even the darkness couldn't pry it loose. The ritual isn't for power now. It's habit. It's the only thing left that makes him feel real. The runes beneath his hands pulse weakly, their magic long spent, and yet he traces them again. And again, and again. Somewhere above, a stone dislodges from the ceiling, crashing to the floor in a spray of dust. The Witch-King doesn't flinch. The world outside crumbles, kingdoms rise and fall, but here, in this sunless tomb, time means nothing. The cycle is all there is, the words, the want, the wound that never heals, and so the whisper continues, winding through the ruins like a serpent eating its own tail. Perhaps this is the true curse, not the immortality, not the servitude, but the memory of the choice. The moment the altar's glow seemed like salvation instead of damnation. The moment he reached for the circlet instead of his sword. The moment he became something that could kneel in the dark for centuries, begging a hollow god for a mercy that died with the man he used to be. The chamber thrums not with power, but with the weight of 1,000 unanswered prayers, and the Witch-King, for the first time in an age, stops chanting. His head bows, his hands still. The silence that follows is so complete it feels like forgiveness. Then the whispers start again. The tale of the Witch-King doesn't end with a battle cry or a fading whisper. It lingers in the space between, like the last note of a song no one remembers singing. Was he a monster? The answer seems obvious when you recount the horrors. Cities in flames, kingdoms reduced to dust, the very air choking on his presence. But stand too close to that fire, and you might see something else in the smoke, not a demon, but a man who once held his daughter's tiny hands, who once wept over the bodies of his knights, who once swore oaths to protect the very people he later slaughtered. History is written by the victors, and monsters are easier to name than broken men. The Witch-King's story isn't just about power or corruption. It's about how grief, left untended, can fester into something unrecognizable. Every choice he made, from the altar in Minas Morgul to the fields of Pelennor, was a step deeper into a labyrinth of his own making. And here's the cruelest twist. By the end, even he couldn't recall the way out. Yet the wind carries more than just his sins. It carries the weight of questions we're afraid to ask ourselves. What would we sacrifice for vengeance? How much loss would it take for us to kneel before the same darkness? The stars above Middle-earth don't answer. They simply watch, cold and distant, as they've done for ages. But down here in the shadows, where the ruins of Minas Morgul groan under their own weight, something stirs. Not a resurrection, not a threat, but a reminder. The past isn't dead, it's waiting, and so the tale ends not with an ending, but with a breath held too long. The Witch-King is gone, but his shadow still lingers in every heart that's ever clenched with rage, in every hand that's ever reached for power to mend a wound it could never heal. The next time you hear a whisper in the dark, don't flinch. Listen, because some stories aren't meant to warn us about monsters. They're meant to warn us about ourselves. Far to the east, in a chamber no living soul has entered for centuries, a single rune on the shattered altar flickers, just once before fading. The wind howls through the cracks, but this time, it doesn't sound like laughter. It sounds like a sigh, and high above, indifferent as ever, the stars shine on.